I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Last week, we had the honor and privilege to accompany Yonatan Samirano here in the UN and stand by her as she spoke about her son, Yonatan. Ayelet has spoken many times of her son, his passion, enthusiasm, his love for the earth and all its creatures, his smile, his laugh, his love of life. As Ayelet said, Yonatan is a life, and the life is Yonatan. That life was stolen by a monster on the UN payroll. As seen on the video, Yonatan was thrown into the back of a truck and taken back to Gaza by an UNRWA employee. The monster who robbed the Samirano family of their son, of his smile, of his embrace, was cashing checks signed and sealed by the United Nations and the UNRWA Commissioner General. To say that Ayelet's pain is agonizing is a monumental understatement. Yet she has received no apology from the UN, no explanation, no any expression of regret. The fact that this is not the topic of today's discussion, that a UN employee brutally kidnapped an Israeli civilian, is beyond me. It is not as if this is a surprise. After all, we have provided hundreds of names and Hamas IDs of UNRWA employees involved in the October 7 massacre. We have exposed many senior UNRWA employees who were Hamas terrorists, and many senior Hamas terrorists who were UNRWA employees. How does this not anger you all? So many of you, not all of you, are UNRWA's largest donors. You give your money and resources to the United Nations and UNRWA, rightfully assuming it would be used for education and social services. Are you not outraged that it has been used to terrorize innocent? Are you not livid at the desecration of the UN's lofty ideals? Before looking outward, one must look to their own house. Because if you truly want to lay the groundwork for regional peace, there must first be a change in the UN's modus operandi in the region. No more incitement of hatred, no more teaching of violence, and no more money for terrorism. Commissioner Lazzarini himself recently admitted that UNRWA's contributions to current humanitarian efforts could be replaced, and I quote, "without a doubt." Well, take him at his word and help us turn a new page for the betterment of all involved. Yonatan is still in Gaza, along with 100 other hostages. Israel will never abandon them, never stop fighting for their freedom. The Council can and must help condemn Hamas, demand their immediate and unconditional release, turn your focus onto the terrorist organization exploiting Gazan civilians as a tool for the extermination of Israel. While we fight for the freedom of our hostages and continue to combat terrorists across Gaza, we will not falter in our extensive humanitarian efforts. Only last week I shared our immense efforts since October. In the past 6 days alone, those efforts continue without relent. For example, last week, over 100 aid trucks entered Gaza through the Kerem Shalom and Kisufim crossings, as well as the Erez crossing in the north. On that same day, 15 trucks of goods from the UAE delivered to the Ashdod port and entered to northern Gaza. This was their second such shipment. It included over 2,000 pallets of water, medical equipment, shelter supplies, and hygiene products. Along with delivering aid, we have ensured the maintenance of essential infrastructure. 11 hospitals currently operate in Gaza and additional 14 field hospitals. Meanwhile, we have protected access to water across the Strip. In northern Gaza alone, 112 liters are available per person per day. I am also happy to report that 50 trucks were collected on the Gazan side by international agencies. However, almost 900 remain uncollected as the aid wastes away. Our discussions require refocusing across all aspects, but our debates on the humanitarian efforts in Gaza are in particular need while Israel facilitates the entrance of hundreds of aid trucks weekly via many crossings, there has been a failure of agencies to collect that aid. While we flood Gaza with aid, there is a drought of distribution. We will continue to fulfill our duties, but the UN and international organizations must step up in this respect. Not only must the UN step up to its aid distribution obligations, but the focus must also shift to Hamas's constant hijacking of humanitarian aid to feed their machine of terror and misery. Let me give you an example. 48 hours ago, together with other organizations, and UNRWA will verify what I'm telling you now, we coordinated the entry of more than 100 aid trucks which crossed Kerem Shalom crossing into Gaza. 97 of those trucks were violently looted by Hamas, with the drivers held at gunpoint. 97 out of 100 trucks. This is an example of the immensely challenging reality that we are facing. We will continue with our efforts, despite the Council continuing to ignore the true cause of the situation, Hamas and its violent greed. Week after week, some at this table villainize and demonize Israel, but your failure to identify the crimes of Hamas against the Gazan people exposes your true agenda, your true bias, and the blinding hatred that lies behind it. Colleagues, Israel is under attack on 7 fronts, including from our northern border, after Hezbollah made a decision to enter the war on October 8 in solidarity with their Hamas terrorist comrades. They fired over 15,000 rockets, missiles, anti-tank missiles, drones, and other such weapons at our civilian population. As a result, 70,000 of our civilians have been made internal refugees. Israel has been perfectly clear on what it takes to restore calm. First, Hezbollah must withdraw to the north of the Litani River, as outlined in Resolution 1701. Southern Lebanon must be freed of Iranian proxies, per Resolution 1559. No other country at this table would accept 70,000 of their civilians being displaced by a terrorist organization. No other country at this table would take any different steps than Israel. No other country would lie down and agree to that terrorist organization remaining on their border. The international community must join us in our efforts to restore Lebanese sovereignty to southern Lebanon, freeing the Lebanese people of their Iranian masters and enforcing the resolutions of this very council. Mr. President, there is a string connecting all of these crises, a common thread which has spilled blood in every corner of the Middle East. It is the same thread that runs a railway of death through Syria and into Lebanon, supplying and training Hezbollah terrorists to carry out their murderous goals. It is the same thread that armed and bolstered Hamas to commit the October 7 atrocities. The same threads destabilizing Iraq and Syria. The same thread that directs the Houthis in their attacks against international maritime trade. Iranian officials have themselves acknowledged their relationship with the Houthis. Their sponsorship of terror is not an open secret among nations. Iran shouted from the rooftop. In a report delivered to you last month, it was revealed that Iran's funds and weapons have transformed the Houthis into a military force, evidenced by hundreds of indiscriminate attacks against merchant ships, as well as UK and US warships over the last year. Now that global threat is steaming towards obtaining nuclear capabilities. We cannot and will not allow that to happen. Iran dreams of a vision of domination made possible by a nuclear arsenal. Iran's nuclear ambitions pose a threat not only to Israel, but to every member state of the UN. We all know that a nuclear-armed Iran would not hesitate to rain down destruction not yet witnessed. Confronting this global existential threat requires a coalition of the courageous. This Council must set the tone, condemn the Ayatollah's regime, impose crippling sanctions, and work with us to draw a line in the sand so the Middle East might heal from the damage Iran has caused. Mr. President, this is a moment for decisive action. The Council must rise to its purpose and address the true instigator of instability in the Middle East. Iran's blood-stained ambitions will only end when we collectively say enough. Before concluding, I must mention the efforts to pass a resolution in this Council which fails to outline the release of the hostages as a condition of a ceasefire. Such a decision would be a betrayal, not only of Israel, but of the 101 families and their loved ones being tormented by terrorist monsters. This includes Yonatan Samirano and his family, to whom the United Nations owed an unpayable debt. Israel will defend its people. We will never abandon our hostages, never forget them, and never stop fighting for them. That's why we started this war, I remind you. Make no mistake, history will remember who stood with us to uphold peace and justice and who allowed terror to flourish. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe to stay updated with our latest content. Until next time, stay informed and inspired. This is Dejobnik signing off.